The first time my father called me a zero in front of 200 senior officers, the strategic briefing room smelled like burnt coffee, floor wax, and cold metal. He stood beneath the Air Force SEAL with 3 stars on his shoulders and one finger pointed at my chest. "Sit down, Lucia," General Arthur Neves said. "You are a zero in this equation. Do not embarrass me." A few officers laughed because he laughed first. Others stared at the folders in their laps. No one wanted to be seen defending the general's daughter from the general. I remained standing in the back row, my hands loose at my sides, my breathing slow enough that no one could see what the sentence had done to me. Across the room, the heavy doors had opened. A Navy colonel in working camouflage stood in the aisle. Silver eagle on his collar. SEAL trident on his chest. Dust still caught in the seams of his boots. Colonel Marcus Hale had crossed 3 states to find one person. My father assumed it was him. It was not. Hale looked past the generals, past the polished shoes and careful smiles, and fixed his eyes on me. "I requested Ghost 13, he said. My father gave a dismissive laugh. "Then you have the wrong room. My daughter works logistics." Hale did not answer him. He asked me one question. "Major Neves, confirm your status." The room became so quiet I could hear the fluorescent lights buzzing over the stage. My father turned toward me with the same expression he had worn at our Thanksgiving table 15 years earlier. The look that said my existence had become inconvenient. That was where this story really began. I was 18 when my Air Force acceptance letter arrived. My mother had cooked turkey, sweet potatoes, and the green bean casserole my father liked. The dining room smelled of sage and furniture polish. A football game played in the next room while silverware moved carefully across good china. I waited until everyone had been served. "Dad," I said. I was accepted. My scores qualified me for the advanced track. He kept cutting his turkey. "What track?" "Intelligence and combat support. Possibly special operations later." My mother stopped pouring gravy. My older brother Jason looked up from his phone. My father finally raised his eyes. He did not look proud. He looked irritated, as though I had announced a plan to damage the family name. "Be realistic, Lucia. The military is not a place for someone like you." "Someone like me? You are emotional. You are small. You do well on tests. But paper is not war." I had outscored every applicant in my district. I had qualified as an expert marksman at a civilian range. The certificates were hidden in a shoebox beneath my bed because the first time I showed him a target grouping, he told me a woman holding a rifle looked desperate. That night, he turned to Jason, who had dropped out of college 3 months earlier. "Take your time, son," he said. "You will find your direction." Jason received patience for failing. I received contempt for succeeding. My mother found me later in the kitchen while she scrubbed the roasting pan. The water was too hot. Her hands were red. "He worries about you," she whispered. "He erases me." She stared at the sink. "Please don't challenge him tonight. Let him be the general. It is easier." That sentence taught me more about our family than anything my father ever said. Peace in our house did not mean safety. It meant everyone agreed to protect his comfort. I left for training the following summer. My father did not come to the airport. He had a golf meeting with a defense contractor. At graduation, the families filled the bleachers with flowers and handmade signs. I searched the crowd until the ceremony ended. My mother had mailed a card. My father had signed his name beneath hers. Nothing else. For years I believed achievement would eventually force him to see me. I collected qualifications, commendations, and scars as if they were evidence in a case I planned to argue at home. Then, during a night exercise in the Mojave, I fell hard against rock, tore my shoulder, and fractured 2 ribs. The hospital windows rattled in the desert wind. Disinfectant stung the back of my throat. I had not slept in 30 hours when my phone lit up with his name. The message contained no question about my pain. "Mom says you were injured. I warned you. Resign before you ruin your life. Patrick from next door is still single." I read it twice. Then I deleted it. That was the evening I stopped trying to become a daughter he could admire. I began becoming a soldier I could respect. The training that followed was not heroic. It was cold mud inside my sleeves. It was swollen feet, blood beneath my toenails, and learning to remain still while insects moved across my face. It was falling asleep over maps and waking with grid lines printed against my cheek. At sniper selection in Georgia, I spent 18 hours in a drainage ditch, while rain filled the low ground around me. My ghillie suit became so heavy that every breath required effort. An instructor passed within 6 feet of my position and never saw me. Silence had always been how I survived my father. Now it became a weapon. I learned to notice what louder people missed. A curtain moving against the wind. Birds leaving one tree but not another. The brief shine of glass where no window should be. My instructors did not praise often. The first time one of them did, he simply looked at my target and said, "Again." In that world, being trusted with another shot meant more than applause. My first deployment placed me above a narrow Afghan valley, watching a patrol move between gray stone walls. The air smelled of dust and hot canvas. Through my scope, the village looked almost peaceful. Then a man rose behind a broken wall with a rocket launcher aimed at the lead vehicle. My father's voice appeared in my memory. "You do not have the stomach for war." I let the thought pass. Wind. Distance. Angle. Breath. I fired once. The launcher fell before the man could use it. 4 Americans came home because I did not hesitate. After the mission, I sat on an ammunition crate and waited for nausea, guilt, or triumph. What came instead was certainty. I could do the work. Over the next 8 years, I completed assignments my family was never allowed to know about. My visible records placed me in logistics and operational planning. The classified file carried another designation, Ghost 13. The name started as a joke after an extraction in Kandahar. Colonel Hale, then a lieutenant commander, had searched the debrief room for me after I covered his team from a ridge for 12 hours. "Where is Neves?" he asked. A communications sergeant pointed to the empty chair I had left moments earlier. "Gone, sir. She is like a ghost." Hale found me outside cleaning dust from my rifle. "You saved my point, man," he said. I waited. Men like my father used praise as currency. They offered it when they wanted something. Hale did not. "You are not here because of your name," he continued. "You are here because when everything became uncertain, you were the most reliable person on the mountain." Then he walked away. I carried that sentence for years. My father carried a different version of me. At family gatherings, he told people I handled supply schedules. When a senator's wife asked where I had spent my second deployment, he answered before I could speak. "Europe," he said, smiling. She was finding herself. I had spent 7 months sleeping beside a rifle. He turned it into backpacking. I said nothing because the operation was classified. He mistook that silence for permission. A week before the briefing at MacDill, he invited me to a military gala at Langley. I arrived in service dress blues. My ribbons were modest compared with what the classified record contained, but they were earned. He looked at me as if I had come wearing a costume. "I told your mother to buy you the blue dress," he said under his breath. "Senator Miller brought his son. How am I supposed to introduce you looking like a chauffeur?" A young lieutenant from my unit approached and greeted me properly. "Good evening, Major Neves." My father stepped between us. "She is not on duty tonight," he said. Then he placed his empty glass in my hand. "Lucia, get me another scotch. The senator wants a gin and tonic." The lieutenant looked down. The senator smiled without understanding. I carried the glasses across the ballroom, while a jazz band played softly near the windows. Whiskey moved against the rim with each step. My face felt hot, but my hand remained steady. When I returned, my father patted my cheek. "Good girl." Later, near the kitchen entrance, he gripped my arm hard enough to leave marks. "Do not hesitate when I tell you to do something," he whispered. "Everything you have came through me. I made you, and one phone call can break you." I looked at the hand around my arm, then at his face. He believed the threat, because no one had ever forced him to test it. That night, I photographed the bruises. I saved his messages. I exported years of emails in which he had contacted commanders about my assignments, evaluations, and promotion boards. I did not plan revenge. I planned protection. There is a difference. If you have ever spent years trying to earn love from someone who only felt powerful when you were small, then you understand why leaving can feel more frightening than staying. The wound is not only what they did, it is the hope that one day they might become the person you needed. I buried that hope the night of the gala. 7 days later, I sat in the back row at MacDill. Colonel Hale entered the briefing room and requested Ghost 13 for an active hostage operation. I stood. My father ordered me down. He called me confused. He called me an administrator. Then he called me a zero. For most of my life, those words would have returned me to childhood. This time, they did not. Hale moved between us. General, he said without raising his voice, you will not interfere with an operational authentication. My father's face reddened. This is my command. This operation is under joint special authority. Hale turned to me. Identifier, Ghost 13. Operational compartment, Sierra Tango. Clearance, Tier 5 special access. Yankee White attached. A glass slipped from someone's hand in the front row and struck the carpet without breaking. My father stared at me. He held a higher rank than anyone else in the room, but he did not possess the clearance required to read my file. The truth did not make him angry at first. It made him afraid. That is impossible, he said. His voice had lost its depth. She works for Air Mobility Command. I have seen her records. You have seen her cover assignment, Hale replied. My father turned toward his chief of staff. Colonel Rowan, tell him. Rowan did not move. Sir, he said carefully, the Sierra Tango compartment is outside our access. The officers who had laughed now watched my father with a new expression, not admiration for me, recognition of him. They understood that the man who lectured them about awareness had failed to know his own daughter. Worse, he had humiliated an operator whose work he was not cleared to discuss. Hale handed a sealed folder to the security officer beside the stage. My father reached toward it. The security officer pulled it back. I am a 3-star general, my father said. Yes, sir, the officer answered. You are still not read into this program. His fingers remained suspended in the air for a moment before falling to his side. That should have been the end. It was only the first reveal. Hale checked his watch. Major Neves, wheels up in 12 minutes. I stepped into the aisle. My father blocked my path. Lucia, we will discuss this now. No, General. His eyes widened. I had never denied him so plainly. You cannot walk away from me. I held his gaze. You do not have the clearance to stop me. I walked past him. No speech. No victory smile. Only the sound of my boots moving toward the open doors. Outside, the Florida heat smelled of jet fuel and rain on concrete. A helicopter waited on the tarmac with its rotors turning. Hale climbed aboard behind me. My phone vibrated before we lifted off. Dad, then again, and again. I powered it down. 16 hours later, I was in a dark operations room at a forward site, watching a stone building through thermal optics. Hale's team was pinned behind a wall. A hostile shooter controlled the only approach to 2 captives inside. My shoulder pressed against the rifle stock. Dust collected along my lower lip. Ghost, Hale said through the radio. Do you have him? I have him. The distance was severe. The wind moved in different directions across the valley floor and the elevated structure. I waded through 2 bad windows. My old life had trained me to react to pressure. The military had taught me to wait until the truth was clean. On the 3rd window, the shooter leaned forward. I fired. 4 seconds later he disappeared from the scope. Hale's team crossed the open ground and recovered both hostages alive. When the operation ended, Hale handed me the first page of his report. Mission success directly attributed to the judgment and precision of Ghost 13. I read it once and gave it back. Keep a copy, he said. I know what I did. He studied me for a moment. This is not for you. I understood later what he meant. Back at MacDill, my father spent the next 2 days trying to regain control. He demanded my unredacted personnel jacket. He ordered Colonel Rowan to identify everyone who had authorized my assignments. He threatened careers. The call was recorded. General, Rowan said, are you ordering me to disclose a compartmented identity without authorization? My father paused. I am ordering you to give me my daughter's file. She is not your property, sir. She is a federal officer. My father ended the call. He did not know that an Inspector General review had already begun. For years, his calls about my career had been treated as the interference of an overprotective parent with too much influence. After the briefing, Hale requested a formal audit. The audit found 7 attempts to alter my assignments, 3 calls made before promotion boards, and 1 recommendation that I be denied command because I was, in my father's words, emotionally unsuited for authority. Each time he told me I had not earned advancement, he had been standing behind the locked door. That was the second reveal. It came 3 weeks later, in a closed conference room at the Pentagon. I sat across from my father at a polished table. An inspector general, a civilian counsel, Colonel Hale, and 2 members of the review panel were present. Rain moved in thin lines across the windows. My father had prepared a speech. I could tell from the folder in front of him and the way he kept touching its edges. He began before anyone asked him to. This is a family misunderstanding that has been inflated by people who do not understand the responsibility of a father. Major Neves has always been ambitious, at times recklessly so. Every call I made was intended to protect her and protect the service from. The inspector placed an email on the screen behind him. It was from my father to a promotion board advisor. Do not advance her into command. She needs to remember where she belongs. The room stayed quiet. He looked at the screen, then at me. That is being taken out of context. A second message appeared. If she is promoted, she will become impossible to manage. His hands began to tremble. He tried to hide it by closing the folder. The inspector read the findings. Abuse of position, improper influence, unauthorized efforts to access classified material, retaliation against a subordinate officer, and conduct inconsistent with command. My father stopped interrupting, his shoulders lowered by degrees, as if each finding removed a piece of the uniform he was still wearing. Then Hale placed his after-action report on the table. While General Neves was arguing that Major Neves lacked command judgment, he said, she was leading operational decisions that recovered 2 American hostages without a friendly casualty. He slid the report toward the panel. No one looked at my father. That was what broke him. Not the investigation. Not the possibility of losing his command. For the first time in his life, he was no longer the center of the room. The inspector asked whether I wished to make a statement. My father looked at me then. His face was pale. He expected anger, accusation, perhaps the long speech he would have given in my place. I had only one sentence. I am not asking this panel to punish my father for failing to love me. I am asking you to address what he did with public authority. Nothing more was needed. He was relieved of command pending final disposition and retired months later at a reduced grade. The news moved quickly through the officer corps, but I did not celebrate. I did not visit the club to watch people avoid his table. I did not return his calls. I went home, removed my boots, and sat on the kitchen floor with my back against the cabinets. The apartment was completely quiet. For years I had imagined justice as a loud thing, a door slamming, a confession, an apology delivered with tears. Real justice was quieter. It was my phone lying face down on the counter while I chose not to answer it. 3 months later, I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop in Tampa. He arrived in a wrinkled polo shirt without stars, ribbons, or aids. He looked older than he had at the hearing. He peeled the cardboard sleeve from his cup in narrow strips and placed them in a small pile. I did not know what you were, he said. I looked through the window at traffic moving along the wet street. That was never the problem. He waited. The problem was who you believed I was when you thought I had no power. His eyes dropped to the table. He began to explain that he had wanted me safe, that the world was hard, that fathers made mistakes. I let him finish. Then I told him the terms. He would not dismiss my service. He would not use family to gain access to my work. He would not touch my career. He would not speak to me as property. If he crossed those lines, the relationship would end. He stared at the shredded sleeve. What if I cannot become the father you wanted? I stopped asking for that years ago. The answer hurt him. It also freed me. He nodded once. Understood, Major. It was not an apology. Some people never find the courage for one. But it was the first time he addressed me with respect when no audience was present. I finished my cold coffee and left. 10 years later, I stood in another auditorium at Langley, while silver lieutenant colonel insignia were fastened to my uniform. Retired Master Sergeant Elena Rodriguez pinned one side. Colonel Hale pinned the other. My father sat in the front row in a civilian suit. He did not stand beside me. He had not earned that place. But when our eyes met, he rose with everyone else and saluted. His hand shook slightly. Mine did not. After the ceremony, a young intelligence officer approached me. Her father was a Marine colonel, who believed she had chosen the wrong career. She spoke quickly, apologizing for taking my time. I recognized the way she held her shoulders, already braced for dismissal. I told her what no one had told me at 18. Your family may give you a name. They do not get to assign your value. She stood a little straighter. That was the moment the story finally ended for me. Not when my father lost command. Not when the room learned my code name. It ended when the pain he gave me stopped being an inheritance I passed to someone else. For years, I believed strength meant enduring disrespect without breaking. I was wrong. Endurance can keep you alive, but boundaries are what let you live. They mistook my silence for weakness because they never understood what silence had built inside me. Patience, discipline, and the ability to walk away without needing the person who hurt me to agree with the truth. My father once told me I was a zero. He was right about one thing: I became nothing he could control. And in that empty space, I finally became my own.